Did you know that the Council of the European Union is one of the most essential decision makers of the EU? This video will explore what the Council of the EU is, what it does, and finally, who controls it. So what is the Council of the EU? The Council is one of the two legislative institutions of the European Union, the other one being the European Parliament. They are co-legislators, both on equal footing regarding the lawmaking process. The Council of the EU is made up of national ministers from every member state of the EU. In theory, each policy area, for example agriculture, should have a total of 27 ministers, one from each member state. But as always, there are exceptions, but we will not get into those today. These 27 ministers are then responsible for passing laws in their respective areas, for example, trade, healthcare, transportation, or as before mentioned, agriculture. So what does the Council actually do? Well, it has four main roles. Firstly, the legislative role, where the Council plays a vital role alongside the European Parliament. However, the Council represents the interests of the member states as individuals, in contrast to the European Parliament, which represents the interests of the European citizenry as a whole. Think of it this way. The European Parliament is the voice of the EU citizens, while the Council of the European Union represents the governments of the member states. Both institutions work together closely to negotiate and adopt EU laws based on proposals from the European Commission. For example, if the EU wants to adopt a common migration policy, the Council would hold a series of meetings to negotiate the details of the proposal. During these meetings, the representatives of each member state would voice their concerns and ideas, and the Council would work to find a compromise that takes all of these perspectives into account. Secondly, the Council is responsible for coordinating the policies of EU member states. This means that ministers ensure that policies and actions of each individual member state are aligned and consistent with the policies of the EU as a whole. Thirdly, the Council is responsible for developing and implementing the EU's foreign and security policy, based on guidelines set by the European Council. Yes, the European Council is not the same as the Council of the European Union. It's very confusing, so make sure to watch my other video on the European Council. Nonetheless, a good example was Russia's initial invasion of Ukraine, where the European Council called for an immediate response, and the Council of the European Union developed and implemented multiple rounds of extensive sanctions. And lastly, there's the budgetary role, where the Council plays a key role in the adoption of the annual EU budget, working jointly with the European Parliament. So who controls the Council of the EU? The Council is led by the presidency from a different EU member state every 6 months. The role of the presidency includes setting out agendas for meetings and representing the institution at events such as international conferences or summits with other world leaders. The presidency also chairs meetings of ministers from each member state on specific policy issues, which are then voted upon before any decision can be made. In conclusion, the Council of the EU plays an important role within the EU, one that cannot be overlooked when considering how laws are passed or regulations are created across Europe's political landscape. This channel is all about the EU, so if you want more educational videos about institutions or EU current events, subscribe and like the video. And if you want to support the channel, please consider signing up to Patreon.